So my name is Kit, obviously. I am the owner and distiller and every other job you can think of here at Ninefold Distillery. I'm a little one-man band in a little micro distillery in Dumfries Galloway. So I'm nearly out of Scotland, but not quite. Still the right side of the border. Here at Ninefold, I just have one product at the moment. I launched about a year ago at the end of June, start of July 2019 with this product. This is my Ninefold Pure Single Rum. It's an unaged, molasses-based, pot-distilled rum, obviously made in Scotland. If you're wondering where pure and single come from, pure means it's pot distilled. You can see the pot behind me here. Single, same parlance as whiskey, so just single distillery. And rum, because like rum has to be, it's made from sugarcane. Now, if you have got the rum in front of you, I see Edinburgh Rum Club says they still have theirs. Recommended serve. It's kind of a cliche, but actually with Coke, I think it works really well. I've had people describe it as an almost kind of cream soda type experience, or like a Coke float or something, if you have it with Coke. Ginger beer works quite well as well, although that's not my preference. My preference is for full-fat cola. Now, I've got an open bottle here, so I'm going to pour myself some. I don't know what sort of tasting notes you might have there. I usually don't tend to, I try not to tell people at these kind of things what I think it smells and tastes like. I like to see what other people can kind of conjure up. I think if I tell you what it tastes like, then that's generally what people tend to pick up on. But since I'm supposed to be presenting to you and I can't share this experience in person, I'll do my best to describe what I get myself. Most people do comment on the smell straight away. It's got a really kind of butterscotchy, it's quite sweet. It really does hit you as soon as it's been poured out. It benefits a little from just sitting in the glass for a little while, but yeah, I mean, you don't have to wait if you're dying to get into it. Yeah, it's got that, because it's molasses based, it's got that kind of treacly, caramelly smell to it, like I said, kind of butterscotch, a little bit of vanilla in there. It's a little kind of fruity as well, and obviously there's a bit of alcohol in there too. It is an unaged product, so it's not been anywhere near a cask, and I've not sweetened it or flavoured it, so this is basically a new make spirit straight off the still. So, on the taste. So again, most people's comment usually is how smooth it is. So it is a 40% spirit, but it's not harsh, it doesn't go down, it goes down easily, it's not a difficult one to get down. If you were to drink it neat, it certainly benefits from a little bit of ice just to cool it a little bit. But really, as an unaged product, its primary goal is to be mixed in with cocktails or with mixers. So my favourite cocktail would be, actually my favourite cocktail is a daiquiri. It's really simple, but it's so delicious. But beyond that, things like mojitos. I've got a great recipe, which is like a kind of an Aperol spritz. So Aperol, grapefruit juice, soda, and my rum, top summer drink. So yeah, and then the kind of finish on that rum is, there's a bit of spice to it, and then it hangs around for quite a while, so it does have quite a long finish to it. So you can see the still behind me. You can enjoy your drink while we go. I'm going to carry my laptop around the distillery so you can have a good look. Unlike Paul, I only have one still. I don't have a whole bunch of them to show you, so that is it. But I'm going to come back to this. So. Now, the building we're in is, I'm actually going to take you outside. It's kind of raining, but I'm going to show you anyway. So this was originally a cattle byre, so a cow shed. So you can see this old stone building that I'm in. And actually, if I show you the rest of the yard I'm in, there we go, my pickup. So this is Dormant Home Farm. This is the central farm, the historic farm in the middle of Dormant Estate. the estate is around 450 acres now, based down in Dumfries, well, we are down in Dumfries and Galloway, and the Caruthers have been on this estate, so that's my family, for about 450 years, and we've been in this area for near enough 700 years, I think. So if you're looking at the logo, the brand for the company, so Ninefold, I've got it on my t-shirts, you might have seen it on my pickup, it's on the bottle. So this is a six-winged angel, and it is the Caruthers family crest. So on a coat of arms, you'd have the crest, which is the thing on the top of the coat of arms, then you've got the shield and then the motto. So for us, it's this six-winged angel in flight. And yeah, it was really important for me to encompass all that rich history of the family into the branding. Ninefold just means that six-winged angel sits in the 9th level in the angel kind of hierarchy. So top angel. Now, there's all sorts of puns I could do about angel share and heavenly taste, all that kind of stuff, but yeah, it's just going to make you kind of groan and yeah, maybe you switch off at that point. Anyway, I make rum from molasses, so there's a big cube of it there. I buy in 1,000 litres at a time, so 1.5 tons of it. That gets pumped into this tank behind me, which is 1,500 litres, but I don't usually fill it. I usually do about 1,000 litres in there. There's a heating jacket on as well. So my fermentation is really warm. It's almost hot, actually. So I set a fermentation off in the kind of mid-30s, and usually climbs up to the high 30s during the fermentation. There's about 20% of the volume in there is molasses, sugarcane molasses, I should say. It's not sugar beet, because I wouldn't be able to call it rum if I used anything other than cane. The rest of what's in there is hot water and yeast. So the yeast gets pitched, and after about 4 days, the fermentation is done, and I'm left with a liquid in there that's about 10% alcohol, 9.5 to 10% alcohol. Peter mentioned earlier the smell in here. He was lucky to visit yesterday, the day after I'd set a fermentation, and it was at peak smell in the building. Oh, and you don't even have to get to the door before you can smell it outside. It's this beautiful, kind of fruity, treacly, hot smell. It is amazing. It's probably the best smell in the whole distillery, in the whole process. So anyway, after about 4 days, that's done. So it gets transferred down to my still, which you've already seen, but I'll give you another look at it. So this is a 500 litre copper pot. It's handmade in Scotland, up in Speyside Copper Works. It's got a little 4-plate rectifying column on it, and that's the condenser. I'll not explain how rum is made. I think Paul's probably already gone through, the exact sort of process of it. Here I do a double distillation. So the first distillation is to take that 10% wash and just distill out all the alcohol. So you're just basically boiling off the alcohol out of the pot, and through the condenser to produce my low wines. And those low wines go back in the pot for a second distillation, where I use this column here. And what the column does is it does all these kind of micro distillations, and it does like an infinite number of them while you're running the column. What it does is it produces a really high strength and quite smooth spirit. If I had a much larger one of these, I could make vodka. I could basically make a really high strength neutral spirit. But with just 4 plates in there, and this is what a plate looks like. So behind each of those portals is one of these copper plates. So what happens is at the end of that distillation, that second distillation, I have a rum which is about 90% in the tank. So it's it's pretty potent stuff. It comes through at about 92% and then drops down to 90 by the time the distillation is done. That's basically my rum ready. That's it distilled. It gets then transferred into another tank. Water is added to it to get it down to 40%, which is my bottling strength. It sits and mellow. It has to sit mellow out for a week. If you just add the water and drink it straight away, first of all, it's warm, distilled. It gets then transferred into another tank. Water is added to it to get it down to 40%, which is my bottling strength. It sits and mellow. It has to sit mellow out for a week. If you just add the water and drink it straight away, first of all, it's warm, and then secondly, it just has all these weird kind of flavors and off notes and stuff. But it does settle down, and that's where you start getting all these amazing smells and things off it. Now I bottle and label here as well, and I basically do all of that. So it takes about 2 weeks, start to finish, to produce the rum. So about a week of fermenting and distilling, and then another week of just resting in the tank. So that's my process. And like I said, at the end of that, I don't do any aging to produce this white rum. However, no business stands still, so I do have to work on other stuff. I do have, so this is a spiced rum that I'm working on at the moment. I've been working on that since the start of the year, and in fact, this is recipe number 50 out of 57 or 58 or something. I'm kind of getting there with the recipe, and I'm hoping in the next kind of month or so I'll get that released. That is going to be based around raisins, cocoa nibs, bit of cinnamon, and maybe some grapefruit, but I'm not entirely sure yet. So yeah, watch this space. Long term for the distillery, though, the plan is to have cask aged releases. So I'll have a regular, I hope, series of aged rums here, as well as single cask releases. So last September, so nearly a year ago, I put down 5 casks of all the experimental rums I'd gone through, all my recipe development, all got blended together and put into the casks I had. 4 of those are virgin American oak, and 1 is an ex-bourbon. This year, I laid down another 6 casks, 2 ex-bourbon and another 4 virgin oak, but with, rather than the experimental rums, with my regular mark. So my actual white rum that I produce and bottle is now being casked. And the idea is to try and build up some stock with time. And like the other guys, I think Ryan was talking earlier about all the different casks that they use, and the same with Paul Matuga. You know, I'll start to play around with different types of casks and see how that affects the overall flavour that comes out. This is cask number 9. This was filled in May, I think. This is a virgin oak cask, and yeah, I brought it through on the forklift just so you can see it.
It's a real thing.
It's a
real thing, and we did sip a little rum from the cask yesterday, so I feel quite happy about that as well. I'm a lucky lad. I wanted a cup of before we kind of jump to the next bit. There's a few comments coming through, and again, this is something for me it's obvious because my journey in rum has been a long time, and I've drunk a lot of rum in lots of different places. But there was a nice comment there from Jordan earlier on in the chat about the depth of flavour from a white rum. And that kind of leads me in. I mean, we sort of like the butter production was a little was good. You mentioned something you do, and hopefully you're not giving away any trade secrets. Is that you use 2 different types of yeast strains?
Yes.
And so fermentation is very, very important. You can elaborate on that.
Yeah. The fermentation is basically critical to what you produce, because when you're distilling, you're distilling out the flavors that are produced when you're fermenting. So you can't take, if you do bad fermentation, or you start off with a bad raw material, or you use some odd yeasts, you can't recover that. You can maybe distill out some of it, but essentially you are taking those flavors and basically separating them out through the still. So yeah, fermentation is key. I use 2 different yeasts. They're commercially available. They're nothing out of this world. The selection process on that was when I was playing around with recipes, one gives a better flavor, as in it's more of a rum yeast. It gives you more kind of heavier, full-bodied flavors. But I found that the fermentation tended to be a lot slower. And when I was getting the distillery up and running, what I was trying to do was to keep fermentation times quite short in order to, in theory, maximize the amount of spirit that I could produce here in any given period. Now, that's been slightly irrelevant because business has been fairly quiet, so that's been, it doesn't really matter. But having done that, I found that another yeast I used had a much, much faster fermentation. So I decided to try using both to see if I could get, a quicker fermentation, but with a better flavor profile. Because the the yeast that gave you a really quick fermentation, yeah, the flavor was okay, but it wasn't as good as the other yeast. So I thought I'll try both of them together to see what that produces, and it seemed to work pretty well. So yeah, it was like I said, I played around with some recipe developments. I had no experience prior to setting up the distillery of, I'd done no honest, I'd done no moonshining, I'd done no, I hadn't done any home brewing or anything like that. I chatted away to some people at Heriot Watt and got loads of advice from people who are now really good friends of mine as to how to go about things. But until I basically put 800 litres in my fermenter, that was the first fermentation I'd ever done. So yeah, it was quite nerve-wracking. And using the distill for the first time, again, it was the first distillation I'd ever done. So £120,000 worth of equipment in here, and I was let loose in it without any experience. So I was very fortunate not to blow myself up. But.
So no, I think so. Pro tip. So I know that we have people that are viewing today that are on all kinds of different positions in their rum journey. Some very experienced, some just starting out. And so the things that you can look out for when you talk, and it isn't just a case of bland stats that like a 2-day fermentation is worse than a 4-day or whatever. It's not that. It's about then how are you processing it downstream. But these are the things that you can look out for, and the point that indicate the points of difference, I think, between distillers.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know that a lot of distilleries, they'll talk about the length of their fermentations as a way of, as part of their USP, or as a way of this is our rum tastes like this because of what we do at the fermentation stage. I tend not to talk about that, other than I think the fact that I run my fermentation quite hot, it's certainly probably a little outside of the official operating window for that yeast, which means you stress it out, and having stressed it, it produces some extra flavors. Now, I just have to be careful I don't stress it too much, or I get kind of off notes. So I think that's what benefits the rum that I make, is that particular process I do. But it's not just that. It is also obviously the distilling side of things. There's I distill it maybe in a slightly different way for stuff that goes into future casks versus stuff that's going to go straight into a bottle, and that's it's things like as the spirit is coming through and I'm collecting what are called the hearts, so the portion of the spirit which is going to be collected for drinking, eventually it gets to a point in that where it's not it starts to get a bit undrinkable. You start to get some kind of more heavier, oily notes in it, and at that point that's where I want to stop collecting the spirit. But that's only because I'm bottling the stuff straight away, and you don't particularly want to be tasting those in a new make spirit. So I tend to, but if I'm doing stuff for casking, I will leave those tails to run through a bit more, give a bit more body to it, on the assumption that they will mellow out a bit once they're in the casks.
I think that's a given. We had another good comment that pointed up, and it was in relation to Matuga, but I think it's worth sharing here as well. In that the observation was that the taste of one batch was a little different to a previous one. Mm-hmm. Now, I think it's probably worth sharing on behalf of all of the craft producers we have here, and we can use the word craft producer quite legitimately here without feeling like some kind of marketing arsehole. That's not swearing, is it? Arsehole's not swearing, is it? Is that 2 dings on the thing? I don't know. Maybe I'm going to get in trouble from JC. But the point is, I think that when you're in a small distillation, a small setup, that actually a little bit of variation is not something to be scared of, and actually is something almost to be celebrated, because actually it takes into account a number of factors that's going on. You're not a huge production cycle that's honed for absolute consistency. This is something you free reign to develop your product as time goes by. If you feel you can improve it, well, then that's absolutely your call to do it. And so batch 1 to batch 10 could be a little different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are basically all, in the true sense, artisanal producers. It's a process where there's only 1 or 2 people involved. Everything's different. Because we're not buying our raw materials in bulk. There's an issue with the consistency with what we're using. So the molasses that I have now is fresh molasses, but it's a different blend to the molasses that I started with last year. And that molasses I started with last year, I bought so much of it that it took me a year to get through. And so by the time I'd got to using that, Yeah, probably the last batch I made before the most recent one was probably not the best in terms of it. Maybe it wasn't as light or as fruity. It maybe lost some of that character. But then that's part of my learning process. You know, I know now not to buy 5 tons of molasses at a time because I don't get through it. So I just buy, one IBC at a time. Make sure I use it within a few months, and I should be good to go. But yeah, consistency is always going to be an issue. Is always a concern of mine before I set up the distillery. In terms of was my palate good enough to detect those inconsistencies between batches? And yeah, that's like I said, it's part of the charm of small produced stuff. And so long as it's not terrible, then
You're never going to send terrible rum out the door. And to be fair, your palate becomes more refined with time, more honed in. So I think your product's only ever going to improve anyway. There's a little bit we've got in order to keep on track. We've got about 10 minutes time, so perhaps we can have the opportunity to chat about what it is to be Scottish rum. We're going to change in tack a little bit on this. I kind of want to make sure we feature this because rum is becoming ever increasingly popular. Gin has been there before, and this is not to criticise gin particularly, but all kinds of things are happening in the world of gin, and perhaps we don't necessarily want some of those things mirrored in the world of rum. So, I mean, you have some I would say strong thoughts. I don't know. Is that a good way of describing it? Strong thoughts?
I do, but I'll temper them for.
You do that.
Yeah, so this festival is really. I know everyone watching is there to have a drink, enjoy these rums, learn more about us as producers. But one of the ideas behind the festival was as an education exercise. So I'm afraid you're going to have to learn some things. We'll be learning some stuff as we go along. But yeah, part of that is to do with. When you mentioned gin, we're not here to be a downer on gin. Most of us probably wouldn't be here if it weren't for the gin resurgence. That's proven that you can be a small scale distillery and churn out really high quality liquid. And yeah, that's led to a lot of us being here anyway. But there have been problems with gin, and a lot of that has been to do with provenance. And authenticity and integrity. And I'm not, this isn't to say this is, ubiquitous across the industry. It certainly isn't. But where you have brands that say they're made in one place, or at least allude to being made somewhere when they're made somewhere completely different, is not really a very transparent or honest way of doing things. And while the Scottish rum industry, as such, is quite small, there's a group of us who are quite keen to ensure that we start off the right way, that we start off with that proper openness, honesty, and integrity about what it is that we're producing, how we produce it, how we label it, and how that's then marketed, I suppose, presented to the buying public and to like wholesalers and the rest of industry as well. And so yeah, it's important for us. We're behind the scenes. We're trying to set kind of a kind of gold standard for what Scottish rum, we think Scottish rum should be, and how we should talk about Scottish rum. Really just to make sure that consumers get the most information possible, so that they can make the best buying choices that they can. And that's really what's kind of behind it all. This is a long-term thing. Rum, because of the nature of, most of us are cask aging stuff. We're putting it away. We're looking at, decades of our business. We want to make sure that the industry lasts that long, and it's only going to last that long if it's got the integrity behind it, that people trust what it is that we make and how we make it, and that we communicate that properly. Scotch whiskey and a whole bunch of the Caribbean rums as well. Come with that. That when you buy a rum from Jamaica or Barbados, or you buy Scotch whiskey, that it comes with that. You know what you're buying. There's no kind of messing around with it. and that's kind of what we're aiming for with Scottish rum. It's going to take a while. It requires, because there's no legal kind of background to it, it requires producers kind of getting on board with what it is that we're trying to do and come along with us. So it's going to be, it'll be tough, but I'm hoping that we can sweet talk some people into doing it the way that we would like to see Scottish rum being done.
Yeah. So an observation from my point is that I don't. I'm not a producer. I'd love to say that I actually did do some production, but observing the UK as a whole, I see hotspots around the UK. I see like Manchester has a scene about it and a vibe about it. I see sort of Cornwall and Devon having a bit of a vibe, and so you get people kind of in an area that really are passionate about, and they want, Cornish distillers want that it's a brand. It becomes a brand in its own right, and Scotland is in that position, I think. Obviously, it was a very good comment made again by Paul last night, because we were sitting around here drinking rum until later than we should have done last night, if I'm completely honest. But we're talking about the idea of regionality, that things that could start to happen within. It could be that Glasgow develops a style associated with it, and this notion, we're on a long-term rum journey right now. Yeah. But if there is a Glasgow style, then if you pick up a bottle of rum and it says Glasgow in it, you kind of feel like you feel like it needs to be that connection, and we understand it. So this is not to be a Billy Downer or anything. This is to be about protecting consumers' expectations, and I think that's everywhere. If you pick something up and it says it on the bottle, then that's what you really hope it should be, and there shouldn't be anything hidden on it. So kudos to you guys for getting together and trying to make this happen now. A lot easier to do it now than 25 years later and try and retrospectively do it.
Hopefully, but I mean, the way that the industry is picking up, it is kind of starting to accelerate, and there are more and more brands all the time. And we need to be pretty quick about it. But things like this, hopefully, with everyone watching, we'll have a better understanding at the end of the day what Scottish rum is, how we make it, and so consumers can start asking those. They should be asking us difficult questions about, where do you get your raw material? How do you distill it? What do you do with it afterwards? How long does it sit in a cask for? It says it's aged on here, but how long has it been aged for? So these are all things that we want people to be asking us, because for most of us, we're totally happy to be answering those questions in a very honest and transparent way. So that's to my core, is to be very open about what it is I do here, and I think the same with the other guys as well.